Better Games, Better Gamers is a show where we talk about how games shape and are shaped by the communities and the people around them. So for our first episode, I wanted to invite my friend and co-collaborator Amar to talk about our indie game project, Pen and Page. Amar is a professional game developer at Ghost Story Games, and he's actually currently working on their upcoming new title, Judas, correct?
Correct.
So the two of us met actually a couple of years ago. He was working on what at that time was called Kids versus Aliens. And we met at just a games meetup, and he invited me to join on as the scriptwriter and kind of creative producer. So I want to bring him on today to share a little bit about his journey towards becoming a professional developer and how that led him kind of to the creation of Pen and Page. Kick things off, I feel like I should already know this, but on the record, what was your favorite childhood video game?
Yeah, good question. So, my first console growing up was the Nintendo 64, and that's where a lot of my sort of seminal memories come from, and including some of my favorite games of all time. So, I remember I played the game Ocarina of Time at a friend's house for the first time when I was like probably 8 years old, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it. I rushed home after I came home, and I was like, "Mom, you got to get me this game. I need it for Christmas. Please get it for me." I fell in love with it. My brother and I both got into it. We got the strategy guide. We like 100% completed. We got every heart piece. We did all the side quests. We got all the gold skulltulas, everything. We completed the heck out of that game because we loved it. And it so, but that actually isn't my favorite game. So couple years later, as you know, Majora's Mask came out for the same console, and that took the cake. That expanded on everything that the Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time set up. The same sort of quest structures, the same item gated progression, the same character dynamics, and a lot of what made and then a completely darker, much more darker aesthetic, themes about death, destruction, violence, sorrow, loss. It was a very dark and mature game, even though it had an E rating. And I was just blown away how you could take a template that works so well, this item gated progression and the sort of the feeling of leveling up a character. And even though that's sort of a universal concept, you can take that same structure and you could apply mature themes to it. And you could expand the depth and the connection that you get with the characters, and seeing how your actions affect the well-being of characters. And when you're a 9, 10-year-old kid, you don't have a lot of power in the world. You don't have a lot of influence. You don't have a lot of ability to change things. This is around the same time as Al Gore was talking about climate change and all these big worldly issues that, oh my God, now I have all this sort of existential angst about, and I feel sort of powerless. Well, Majora's Mask was a game where you didn't feel powerless. To maybe to a certain extent, you do feel powerless because you die every 3 days, but to the extent that you can unmess up these people's lives and have just this much of an effect on their day-to-day life, before it all sort of, there is kind of this nihilistic take with Majora's Mask where everything is going to fail anyway, everything's going to go wrong, everything's going to sort of, the world's going to end in 3 days, so what you're doing here really doesn't matter, just kind of like in real life, what we're doing here doesn't really matter. But in that limited time window that you have the power to do something with this group of people in this setting. And those are the themes that I took, not only from, uh, those are the values that I apply not only to the games that I make, but also the life that I live. We only have a limited amount of time in this world, and there's only a small amount of time that we can affect those around us. So, the best thing that you can do is make the most of it. Um, in that game, of course, you can slow down time. You can't really do that in real life, but it's still one of those experiences uh, that sticks with me to this day. And every like 10 years, I replay that game, and it's just as good as the day I played it for the first time in 2000, 2001 thereabouts. So that's probably my favorite game of all time. Just purely for the sentimental reasons, but also the thematic reasons.
Nice. What would you say was your favorite quest or dungeon? What's that really sticks with you?
Yeah, so there's one quest in that game where you have to save a young daughter's so like she's a little girl and she's living in the in Ikana Canyon, which is like the sort of haunted spirit world that's been taken over by dark magic. And so there's all these like zombies, the Gibdos, running around the world, and they've sort of trapped her and her father in their house because if they go out, they'll get attacked. Um, and the only way to save her and her dad is, well, you have to like start a waterfall, which gets a music box playing, which all the Gibdos are allergic to music and they shrivel away and they die. But the quest isn't over. You have to go inside the house and then you have to save. Um, you it doesn't tell you this, but you have to save her father, and it's a moment that completely subverts your expectations. So you go inside to the house, you go downstairs, and there as soon as you go downstairs, the father pops out and he has been mummified. He's been zombified and he looks like one of the enemies that you're used to fighting. And if you pull out your sword, you will immediately fail the quest because you're trained as a player to say, hey, that's a Gibdo, that's an enemy, I need to dispatch it right now. But that's not what you're supposed to do. What you're supposed to do in that quest is you're supposed to take out your ocarina and play the Song of Healing, which is a melody that um, heals people. It it's a melody that grounds them and makes them remember who they originally were, as if you push a big reset button on them, and they kind of revert to this. I don't want to say childlike state, but this moment before prejudice, which a lot of us have as children. I don't think any of us grow up with racist feelings, with prejudices, with biases. Those are all things that we learn over time. And sometimes something as just innocent as a piece of music that you hear, that can take you right back to the moment that you first heard it, or a moment of before you gained all your bitterness, and that's the moment right there. A lot of people would resort to violence in that moment, but sometimes you don't appeal to violence to solve your problems. Sometimes you appeal to something more pure, something more heartfelt, something more innocent. And that was the moment that stuck with me the most, more than any weapon, more than any other dungeon, more than any quest.
Mhm.
Um, that one was it was it's a theme about just a child's love for their parent, a parent's love for their child, and how those things can get obfuscated with years and years of bitterness, and it can all get reset if you're willing to invest in an emotional conclusion, an emotional resolution, rather than a violent or physical conclusion. And that really struck with me. That was one moment. The other moment, uh, kind of in a similar vein, was there's this quest. Uh, First, have you played this game? If let me know how much
Yeah,
detail I need to get into.
not as much, and go right ahead.
Okay, okay. So the other quest that really stuck with me is there's this long quest that takes all 3 days, um, and basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to reunite these two lovers who they've kind of been they've shunned each other because there's some drama, there's some issues, there's a curse, and they're not they're struggling to plan their wedding. Um, and there's issues with like, oh, the wife works at the inn, she doesn't have time, she's busy, and she hasn't heard from him in a long time, so it's not a good time. So it's up to you to facilitate this marriage. And unfortunately, the wedding happens about 30 seconds before the moon hits the Earth, before it hits the land and destroys everybody. So you spend this entire 3 day cycle doing quests for these two lovers, like, oh, deliver this letter, oh, give him this, give him that, give her that, talk to this person for me, give this on behalf of me to my lover, and you do all these preparations for this wedding that happens minutes before the world gets destroyed, and right after the wedding happens, your fairy tells you, hey, play the Song of Time, go back to day one and reset the cycle. And of course you do that, and you reset the cycle, and then of course they're no longer together. And and that was another beautiful moment for me. Just, it doesn't matter how long it takes. If you can repair the relationships in your life, then even doing it right as the world is crashing down, it's worth it. It's 100% worth it. So, uh, honestly, people laugh, but Majora's Mask is like probably some of the most emotional piece of media that I've ever experienced in my entire life. Even if it wasn't as good of a mechanically good as its predecessor, Ocarina of Time, that was the first time I realized games aren't just about the here and the now. It's not just about the mechanics. It's not just about how you play a game. It's not just a time killer. I goodness gracious, I would not call games a time killer. They are you can really make connections with the characters, even if they don't talk, even if they don't say. There's no pre-recorded dialogue. It's all text bubbles in that game, and all the music are MIDI files. There's no pre-recorded orchestra. You don't need the best tools and technology to build the most meaningful games. Um, and so that was kind of my introduction into whoa, games can be just as great of a form of art as books, as any other work of fiction, music, movies, poems, whatever, plays. There are many ways of moving oneself, and games just happen to be my medium.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, and that's kind of a great segue. Really wanted to hear a little bit about how you went from there to becoming a game designer, and kind of just talk a little bit about that journey. What did that look like, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, sure. So game design is something that I always kind of wanted to do at the back of my head, even from as early of an age that I can remember thinking about a career. It's always something that I wanted to do, but I always kind of had it in my mind as being sort of an impractical thing. And I have Indian parents, so they kind of tried to steer me away from it. And I get it. I totally get it now, why they would want to do that. But basically, I always thought of it as something that was like, I'm sure all of us have heard the reputation that the gaming industry has as being a place where uh, dreams come to die, so to speak. Where you work for because you're passionate about something, you work to the bone. Maybe your paycheck isn't as good as if you work somewhere else, and there's a lot of crunch, and there's a lot of you have to give up a lot of other aspects of your life in order to pursue something game design, which if that's what you're passionate about, then there's a lot of sacrifices that have to go into it. So from early on in my life, I was dissuaded both internally and externally from getting into it because, well, um, there isn't necessarily a good career path outlook. And my parents would give this to me every single day. They'd be like, maybe you shouldn't study game design because that won't translate into a comfortable life for you. Um, and so from an early age I was kind of dissuaded from that. And when I went to college, I didn't study game design. I studied electrical engineering, and my first job out of college was at SanDisk, where I was working on hard drives, and that was a fine job until it wasn't. um, it was, and I think at that point I knew I needed a career pivot. I kind of realized at that point maybe that track wasn't right for me. I wasn't excited about it, and I think a lot of the opportunities were sort of out of reach for me anyway. So it was around that time that I started teaching myself how to code, how to program. And the first thing I did was I had a MacBook at the time, so I opened up Xcode and I wrote myself an iPhone app. I wanted to write something for myself that was useful, that an app that I could use in my day to day life. At the time, and I still am driving a Prius that doesn't tell me what my global mileage is, like what my average MPG in my tank is at any given time. So I wrote an app that will do that. So every time I fueled up, I would enter my odometer, the amount I filled on gas, um, and then the amount that I spent, and the number of gallons that I filled as well. So it would give me a rolling MPG average for my car every time I filled up my gas tank. So I used that to sort of pivot into a software role, and I worked in the tech industry at a wonderful company called Chegg for about 4 years. Um, but also during that transition period, there was about 2 to 3 months between when I was jobless and I was going to the San Jose University Library pretty much daily to just like place to focus, place to get away. I was applying like I'd spend the first half of the day just applying to jobs, just shotgunning out resumes far and wide as I could. I had no luck, but at the same time, I was teaching myself other skills. So iPhone development, of course, but then um, there was one class I took in college, sort of a game production class where we like this was just an elective that I took, And the class was taught in Unity, and so I was like, oh, okay. Like I did like one project in that class at the time, but there was something in the back of my mind that I was like, huh, Unity. Maybe I should come back to this someday. And not having a job is the perfect time to like get into the stuff that you otherwise wanted to pursue. So I started. I downloaded Unity, and I started making a game. I had no plans. I had no high level structure on what I wanted to do. I knew I liked platform games at the time, so I was like, I'm going to make a platformer. And I have no skills um, in animation. There was another class that I took in college too, which was about actually, sorry, it was the same class where we also learned a unit in Maya. And so I had the very like one semester of Maya modeling experience. So I made very primitive assets for this game. And C sharp is very relatively easy language to get into. So I had just the bare minimum amount of qualifications to make a game. Very basic programming skills and very basic modeling skills. So I made a first-person game because that way I wouldn't have to model a character. Um, and I just made a bunch of prefab. So like I used a bunch of free assets that I could find. So like if you play that game now, islanddropthegame.com, feel free to download it right now. Shameless plug. Um, you can download for Mac or PC. It's free. And you can see that there are a lot of these stock assets that are used, and the assets that I made are very basic, very low poly, very simple shapes, cubes, extruded spheres, cylinders, that kind of stuff, all haphazardly stuck together. It's not a good game. It's by any stretch of the imagination, but it's all it is it's about a 2 hour romp through an island where you jump through platforms, and I just wanted to make something that I would enjoy playing. And that was my only goal. I didn't work with anybody. I didn't get any outside help. All the models were mine except for a few stock assets. All the code was mine that I wrote from scratch. And I think I did use some royalty free sound effects on like Freesound or something like that, freesound.org. But it was purely a passion project. The goal was not to monetize it. The goal is still not to monetize it. I don't intend on monetizing it. It was just I want to prove to myself that I can make games if I really want to, and B, um, that this is really what I want to do. And my answer to both of those questions was yes. So this was years and years and years before I got into the industry professionally. So I was working. I started that project in about this is probably like April or May 2014 at the time. Um, and then I was working at Chegg for 4 years. Chegg is a great company, but it's tech, so it's very iterative, cycles, sprints. So it was relatively low in terms of workload, which gave me a lot of free time to finish up Island Romp, which was done in about October 2016 ish, um, and then after that I immediately started work on the next project, which I have been working on to this date. Um, at the time called Kids versus Aliens. We didn't have a working name for it for a long time. I think around 2017, maybe early 2018 ish. I don't exactly remember when, but we settled on the name Pen and Page as well. Actually, the name came from the character, the assistant character, who we decided his name was going to be Page. And we're like, we need something that will go along with that name. So what would be a good like cutesy companion name? And Pen just kind of worked. Pen is short for Penelope, so we wanted to have a female lead because I think. Well, I mean, I think we all have that sort of universal middle school experience of not fitting in. I think that's especially true for middle school girls. So I wanted to make a game that's I didn't Daniel and I we talked about this as well, that we wanted to make a game that's more inclusive, and we wanted to um, yeah we're all guys, very male dominated field. I think it's always good when girls see their own representation in games. I think it's a positive force.
Talk a little bit about the team and kind of how they came together. What's kind of the story? Talk about how that's kind of shaped and ebbed and flowed a little bit.
A lot of what I'm going to talk about has been a learning process. Certainly for me, I've never really managed a team. I still don't. I wouldn't say I manage you guys in any official capacity, but at least being uh, maybe nucleus is a better word for it. Just like it's I don't want to say it's my project because it's not just my project, but certainly main coordinator. I probably did most of the game logic and stuff. So and main person for implementation. So it's always kind of revolved around me in some capacity. So right after I've like finished working on Island Romp back in 2016, like I said, a long time ago, I went to the Khartoum bar uh, in San Jose, which is where a South Bay indie game developers meetup was happening. And I brought the project over. I didn't really have any goals, and I didn't have any roles that I was looking to fill in particular. I was looking for people who were kind of on the same page as me. And the way I described it at the time was like, oh, we're a garage band of video game developers. There's no studio. We didn't have professional tools. We didn't have funding. Obviously, that was a big thing. Um, and we just kind of met up at the time weekly. There's me and three other guys at the time, and of course, things come up with people's lives. This is one thing that I've learned and it sounds so stupid now, but I was a very naive, whatever, 25-year-old at the time, being like, oh, everybody's going to be self motivated and they're going to want to work on this because they're passionate about it. Because certainly I was, but I think it's hard to pin people down. I think you basically run into one of two issues. Obviously, if you're not paying people, is one is you don't get necessarily the best commitment to the project um, for a skilled person, or the people that you bring on aren't necessarily the most skilled, and all they bring is their passion, which has its own set of issues. So the first, like, I would say 3 to 4 years of this project, like 2016 to 2019, 2020, that's kind of how we were operating. We're meeting up weekly. The goal was to finish the game so that it was playable from beginning to end. It is now playable from beginning to end. Um, and and the whole goal of that was to figure out what the story was going to be, figure out who the characters were going to be, figure out what the interactions were going to be, set up reasons, set up encounters and situations for why the characters are doing what they're doing and why they're going to the places that they're going to. And I think from that perspective, and from the organizational standpoint of the team, we accomplished that. We got all the story written, which you did a great job on, by the way. Um, we got all the dialogue recorded. We got all the 2D, all the story assets done, which is great. Um, and we got a lot of good 3D models and a lot of 3D assets. We got some sound design as well. Um, but as of course, as you know, there are some bigger aspects of the project that we have been struggling with, and we currently are struggling with now. Um, but now the biggest, and I'm sure a lot of people who are, if there's anybody watching or listening to this right now, are just going to laugh at this. But like, yeah, it turns out if you pay people, you get way better work. Uh, Duh.
Who'd have
Um,
thought?
yeah, who would have thought, right? Um, and that's exactly how the focus of this project has been pivoting.
What's kind of that step for taking these passions and kind of getting that door into the industry? And what would you say to someone maybe 10 years younger than us who's just thinking about doing what you're doing now?
First of all, I'm going to say straight up, it depends on which path you want to take. Do you want to like start your own studio, manage your own team, kind of like what I'm doing with Pen and Page, or is your goal to break into the gaming industry and get an actual job in like the AAA space, the mobile space, or whatever? Because the advice I'd give is slightly different. So I'll give both. So if you want to manage your own project, um, pretty much like you got to get comfortable with the tools of the trade. So download Unity, download Unreal. They're both free to download. Um, or I'm not super familiar with CryEngine or Lumberyard. I think those are also available to consumers these days. I'm not sure. I actually don't know, but definitely get used to one of them. If not both, at least one of them. And of course, depending on, do you want to focus on the mobile side? Do you want to focus on the AAA side? That might influence whether you go Unity or Unreal. But either one is a good choice. Either one works. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter. All you really need to get out of that process is develop your vocabulary, your game design vocabulary. When somebody talks about an asset, when somebody talks about a pipeline, when somebody talks about when they throw around words, like, what is a prefab, what is a blueprint, um, how does the level editor work, what is the content browser? Like, these are all things that what is a component? These are all the terminology that you will need to be very comfortable with. And if you want to manage a team, you're going to have to speak the same language that everybody else is speaking. And at the very bare minimum, have a working understanding. Don't I'm not saying go out and make your own game, but at least get comfortable with the basics of how games are made, and at least get simple things implemented in the editor, which you won't even need necessarily programming knowledge to do. So, like, for example, get used to the idea of trigger boxes and collisions, because basically everything in a game is dictated by
Triggers.
things
Yep.
colliding into other things. Triggers, yeah, exactly. So that is you have to be familiar with the game development process, or at least the using a game engine. That is like the bare minimum. You got to know what the tools of the trade are, and the more you get into it, I think the more effective you will be. Um, and then the other track that I would the other piece of advice that I would give that applies to both tracks, whether you want to start your own team or whether you want to get into the industry, is specialize, specialize, specialize. Get good at one thing, or get really good at one thing, and then have working competency in like one or two other things too. But the most important part of that is get good at one thing. Pick a lane, whether that's you want to be a great C++ programmer, go learn C++. You want to be a 3D artist, get really good at Maya, know how to rig a skeleton, um, or sort of that kind of overlaps with animation. Know how blend shapes work. Know all those things that that all the aspects that matter to you. That is the number one advice I could give for any aspect of the game industry. If you want to get hired, people are naturally going to ask you, well, what do you want to do in the industry? And if you have good experience with what it is that you're trying to get into, that's going to put you on a level up. And sort of related to that point is have a portfolio
Amen.
that can be
Amen.
easily
Amen.
referenced. Oh my goodness. If you tell me that you're the world's greatest level designer, it's like, okay, show me something that you worked on. I'm like, oh well, it's on my high school laptop. I haven't pulled it out of my bed in 10 years. Like, that's not helping. That is not going to do anything for me, because I'm not going to be able to assess the quality of your work as somebody who's hired.
It's so easy to set up a Wix or a Squarespace or just do it on the Blue draw.
Bluehost,
You can
whatever,
just
do it.
Dropbox it.
Yeah.
Just do put together a portfolio of what you've done. Put together. You've done so many cool projects in
Yeah.
school. You've done it's yeah. I mean, you can be a part. GitHub, yeah. Put your
Yeah, put your school
GitHub. Give
projects
them
on
your
there. It doesn't matter.
GitHub.
If you
But
worked on something
you
cool,
need to show what you've done. You need to have that tangible effort.
yeah, portfolio is super important. And then resume is super important as well. You obviously want to be. I mean, so here's the way most recruiters slash people who review resumes, how they look at resumes. You typically will get a PDF of your resume, or sometimes a Word document, whatever, and then we're going to control F for specific things that we're interested in. So if we're hiring somebody like for an automation role, for example, at Ghost Story Games, I want to see the word Jenkins on there. If I don't see the word Jenkins on there, straight to the recycling bin. I'm not even going to look at it, because if you don't have the relevant skill set, why am I wasting my time? So know what those keywords are. It kind of goes in with the know what the tools of the trade are, and specialize in something. This kind of comes as a byproduct of those two, but definitely know what the keywords are. Say things like, if you're trying to get into project management, Jira. Say Agile. Say Scrum. Drop those words in. Demonstrate experience in those fields. If you're trying to get into modeling, Maya, FBX, MA, Blender, skeletons, rigging. These are all the keywords you want to make sure are in your resume. Like, if you write a whole sentence to me about, like, well, one time in college I did. It's like, well, this is wasting my time because like that. Sure, that's useful, but I'm
Yeah,
looking for
well,
these
it's that
specific
matching.
words.
It's interesting now because there's the technology there. You can go in and use AI. You can take the job description and take your resume and really look at, okay, what are those bullets? How does my resume answer that bullet? And it's like, you don't want to do the white text. It's so easy to highlight a resume and see the white text, but you want to be definitely like, if you would need to use these tools, if you need to use ChatGPT.
It'll become clear if you actually know what you're doing or not, and if you can talk about your workflows, that'll be a big
Yeah.
plus.
What do you wish was different about the game industry?
I think the gaming industry does a lot of things right. They're also subject to a lot of politics, and so there are some things that I think are. I think there are some ways that the gaming industry is getting better. I mean, obviously, crunch culture continues to be pervasive amongst, especially the AAA gaming industry. They have these tight deadlines and big budgets, and so they really work everybody to the bone. I'm lucky at Ghost Story Games. We don't do that at all. We have a very it's very foundationally important for us to have a good work life balance. So I'm incredibly grateful for our management because they actually let us take the time we need and spend time with our families, which is very valuable. The game industry is of course profit motivated, and it's in any entertainment industry that where art is the core sale thing that is being sold. So what like when you consider the music industry, when you consider the film industry, when you consider any other creative industry, um, there's going to be a lot of uh, politics. There's going to be a lot of opinion differences, and there's going to be a lot of some amount of turnover too. And all those things. I mean, this is inherent to any creative industry. You know, there needs to be better ways of dealing with these kinds of differences. And I don't know what the solution is, to be honest. Like, I think we there are because there are projects that suffer from extreme ends of the spectrum. You have projects that are, I'm sure you've heard plenty of examples of projects that are rushed out the door way too quickly just to meet a deadline, some arbitrary deadline, and they either ship with bugs or they ship incomplete or they ship without certain features or the developers promise certain features that they never end up delivering on. This is a pervasive problem in the gaming industry. That probably tends to be the bigger of the two problems. The other problem on the other end of the spectrum is there are some games that come in with a lot of they start production with a lot of fanfare and a lot of top talent and a lot of uh, ideal idealness about them, I guess, um, and they end up for production reasons not turning out the way they should have. So, I mean, just to list a couple of games that I can think of like that, like Duke Nukem Forever. That game was in development for like 14 years, and it never delivered on its promise. It was like a bargain bin game at best. Um, and I mean, Star Citizen, I'm sure will be great someday, but it cost the country of India less money to send an actual spacecraft to the moon than the development costs for Star Citizen have incurred so far. So, um, maybe that game. I'm sure that game looks pretty sweet. Like I've seen the trailers and it looks great. And I hope it does well. I really wish the team that team the best. But it's one of those things where like protracted development can causes its own issues, and this is especially in creative industries where you're not trying to optimize a technology or a product. What you're trying to do is you're trying to build something creative. If a lot of the people who started the project creatively leave before the project even comes to completion, that is going to cause some pretty serious and major problems. Um, and it's going to basically involve a lot of people working on a project that no one is actually passionate about, because the people who were passionate about it have long since left. So now we've inherited all of these, not we, but like one developer who's working at such a sad studio has inherited all this baggage of this project that some people were passionate about once upon a time, but now nobody's just like, well, we're working towards this vision that nobody's advocating for anymore. And I'm sure that's a problem with other creative industries too. And I don't know if there's a good way of solving it other than trying to vet better people and um, hold ourselves to higher standards. But it's really hard. I think I think maybe that is a harder problem to solve, but there are other problems that I could identify that the gaming industry solved. The gaming industry is obviously a very male dominated space. I was genuinely surprised when I walked into my first day at the job at Ghost Story, and seeing so few women in the office. Even coming from tech, which is funny. Tech is another very male dominated space, but I actually saw more women in tech than I did in the gaming industry. So so I think the gaming industry can certainly do a better job of being more inclusive, which is particularly fascinating to me because it's interesting. You noticed this too. At our we previewed Pen and Page again this summer at Mag West in San Jose, and one of the things that I thought was so fascinating that I did not expect at all was how many people wanted to play our game that were women. It was probably close to 50-50. And I don't know why. I mean, I'm being honestly surprised in a positive way, but I was not expecting that at all. Um, and not just cis women, trans women too, all kinds of people from all kinds of the spectrum. Gaming is a very diverse industry, which I'm very surprised,
Yeah,
pleasantly
well,
surprised by.
it is. It's so much of, and I forget the statistics, but it's pretty much at this point, I think it is like 50-50. And I just had a talk earlier today with someone who's trying to break in. And it's so much kind of what I was telling her is there is so much of a need for more voices. And Marie Ablaza, I met she works at Netflix Games. She did a Cozy Games meetup. I was at GamesBeat, and there's like it's this in this little building in downtown San Francisco. And you go upstairs, and there's this like really nice little lobby, and there's another room that had a lot of the presentations. And so Marie organized the Cozy Games meetup for games like Stardew Valley or Spirit Pharaoh is one of my favorites. And so it was just, I think it was on, I can't remember if it was the first or second day, but you could immediately tell when the meetup was happening because it was just all of the most colorful people in the room. I think,
Mhm.
so I think it helped it back. There is those people are in the community. They are such a big part of gaming. There have been women that have been making games for 30, 40 years. There's a huge list of these
Mhm.
women pioneers in gaming, and they weren't necessarily getting the right recognition. And so it's
Like we can have a better gaming community if
yeah,
the gamers
yeah.
become
Well,
better.
and
That's all
that
I'm
I
trying to
mean
say.
that is the question, because it's so much of, is it better games or better gamers? Because what's where does it come from? Are the games shaped by the community, or are the community shaped by the games? Is whose responsibility is it? And so I'll pose that question to you: is
Mhm.
for these problems, how do you think that this can be better? How do you think we can go about solving this problem as game developers, as gamers?
The two answers that I instinctively would say is, I mean, higher diversity. I mean, you are benefited by having a more diverse cast of employees who work for you, or if you're in a diverse team, that's going to be better for you than if you're in a homogenous team. I think, especially in the creative space, diversity of opinion is great because what one group of people might think is a good idea might not be appreciated the same way by a different group of people. And I think, I think to a certain extent, we've seen that change in the gaming community already. Things are sort of trending in that direction, which is good news. But I think the subject matter of games can be more inclusive too. I mean, I think well, I remember certainly growing up on Xbox 360 era games. Every single protagonist on that console was like a gruff, bulky, white dude, and very cisgender and all that stuff, which is fine. I mean, I think I think at that time, maybe that's what the gaming demographic looked more like anyway, maybe. Um, but certainly as art reflects society. Um, but at the same time, it is an artist's obligation to put out a set of values that confines with society, um, to a certain extent, perhaps. Um, so I think we're seeing it, for example, even in the AAA gaming industry. I think Rockstar Games, for example, has had a lot of criticism for many years, for as long as the GTA series has been around. Certainly, that oh, these are very male centric games. Like you always control a male character, and like you can pick up prostitutes, or you can go to strip clubs, or you can play interactive sex mini games with a girl, and all it does is commodify women. Um, and I think up until
Yeah.
like literally days ago when they just released the GTA 6 trailer, boom, now we have a female protagonist. So I think certainly that's a step in the right direction. Um, okay, I have two thoughts on this. One is that yes, this is a step in the right direction. The female protagonists represent female gamers, and I think it's always good to make more sets of gamers feel included. But I don't necessarily think that that should come at the expense of a creative vision. So if like for example, let me give you a perfect example. I've never been to the state of Wisconsin before, but I would love to play a game set in Wisconsin that follows, a young boy walking through the woods and the adventures that he has. I don't think that character should arbitrarily become diversified because that's not the type of character that would be doing that type of thing. Um, so if there's a boy in Wisconsin who grew up in Wisconsin, walking the woods, and he wants to make a game about a little white boy in Wisconsin who walks through the woods and the adventures that he finds, there's nothing wrong with that. If I think when the opportunity exists that diversity can be included, I think yeah, it's always a good idea to include diversity, but we shouldn't at the same time marginalize or minimize somebody's experience just because they are not a minority, not straight, not whatever, white or whatever. So you know like for example, someday I may want to make a game where the protagonist is male, and technically I haven't done that yet. First game didn't have a protagonist, or didn't have
Yeah.
like you are the
Yeah.
protagonist. It is physically you in that body, so it's whoever you are. And then the second game is a obviously pen.
I don't know how I haven't been following announcements. Is the protagonist of
Judas, the title character, is also a female. So yeah, I've literally never worked on a game with a male protagonist before. So so for example, as a game designer, I will want to do that. I will want to make a game with the straight male perspective because that's my perspective. And and the last thing I would want is for people to come after me and be like, "Hey, this game is not inclusive enough because it's about a straight male." Um, and so I think yeah, to a certain extent diversity sorry, to every extent diversity is good, but if there's a specific creative vision that involves somebody who is not diverse, I think that's totally fine. Like sometimes I just want to be the gruff space marine who shoots aliens with his
yeah.
chainsaw bayonet gun. That's that
Yeah.
that's an experience too.
You want, and I think that's the thing. Everyone wants to see themselves, and so in the games they play, and everyone feels like they have games that they can see themselves in. They have stories that they can see themselves in, and have those perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody likes identifying with the characters that they see on screen to a certain extent. Um, and so I think that
Yeah,
aspect is yeah,
yeah, and
it's
that
definitely
kind
universal.
of I guess we talked a little bit about what could be better, and I think that's kind of what do you think if you had to pick something? What do you enjoy most about working in games?
Oh, there's only one answer to that question. Um, when okay, you've worked a desk job before, as have I. That's not in an industry of our passion. There's a feeling that you get on Sunday night where you're just like, my freedom is about to end, and I'm about to have to wake up and either physically drag myself to an office, or if you're remote telecommuting, go in like stare at a computer for the rest of the day, getting on Zoom meetings. What is it all in service of? And if the answer to that question is money, first of all, there's nothing wrong with that answer. If money is what motivates you, you should be motivated by money. Um, but if that answer and that answer does not satisfy you, then you are going to wake up on Monday morning feeling like uh, like crap, and you're not going to be excited about work. And there's a sinking feeling that you get, this sort of existential angst you get when you're going into a sort of 9 to 5 where you're like, what am I doing with my life? I'm slaving over a computer or whatever it is that you do. Working. My boss is making 10x what I do. The shareholders are making 100x that, and yet I'm the one who's doing all the work in this company. And what do I have to pay for? I have to spend 8 hours doing this 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, um, and then I get 4 hours at the end of my day to get in all of my exercise, my cooking, my cleaning, and maybe some time with my family if I'm lucky. So when I moved to gaming, yeah, I still do have to go in 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, but I don't get that dread about what is it all in service of. Because just like in Majora's Mask, where we know we only have X amount of days left, it's about what you make with the time on your life. And if you're working on something that's meaningful to you, something that you're passionate about, something that makes an impact in a way that is consistent with your beliefs and the things that you enjoy, then that feeling of dread, of existential dread, just kind of goes away. And I'm not making as much money as I was in tech, um, and it's certainly harder to pay for certain things. Um, but I don't know. I just don't think like yes, money doesn't buy you happiness, but having more money certainly doesn't hurt. um, and I understand, there's a lot of people out there who having money is very, to them, like the pursuit of money is freedom for them, and that is valuable to them. I totally get that. I completely understand that. Um, but like, how much is enough? And how much is it enough to justify doing something that you don't really care that much about, some outcome that you're not really that invested in, something that doesn't mean anything to you? Like, I love my last job, but we had sprints every 2 weeks where we'd A/B test like the language of a button or like the placement of an ad on a right rail, and like this would be all we did for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. And I'm like, what am I really doing with my life? How much additional value am I adding that I need to like I need to drive to an office, like, buy gas, pollute the environment, do all this stuff, and just all for what? To move a button a couple of pixels to the left? What is this all for? And I just couldn't do it anymore. I just I got very uh there was the existential angst began to set in too
The,
much. So sorry. And then the moon's coming down for all of us anyway. It's just a question of what are you going to do between now and
yeah,
when the moon crashes? Um,
yeah, that's a great
yeah.
great way.
So
Great way to kind of close this off. So I do have some. I did want to do a little bit of a closing. I know there were so many announcements, and we're still both catching up on them. But what upcoming games have been on your radar?
I hear the Switch 2 might be coming out next year. So if that's the case, then I'll get that probably. Um, and once again, I have not got a chance to look through the Game Awards announcements, so maybe something in that list.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here. This is awesome. Um,
Oh yeah, my
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, please hit subscribe and follow on bettergamesandbettergamers.com and social media.